You will be getting married to Obinna, the crippled son of Chief Nana.
How can I marry a cripple man? How can I marry someone I do not even know? Please, father, I beg you.
Enough. This is not up for debate. As I have said, so shall it be. You will marry him, and that's final. Lock her in her room. She will remain there until the wedding day.
Will she truly marry the man in the wheelchair? If she does, can she endure it? Or will she choose to run away? What happens next will leave you stunned.
Like and subscribe.
Ebube was a 23-year-old beautiful but sad-looking girl who lived with her father, Mr. Nonso, her stepmother, June, and her youngest stepsister, Alice. Her life was a tale of suffering, rejection, and endurance. From a young age, she had learned that love and warmth were luxuries she could never afford. Her father despised her because she reminded him of an unwanted union with her mother. Nonso had been pressured into marrying Ebube's mother due to a business alliance between their families. It was a marriage he never desired, and when she died just 2 years after giving birth to Ebube, his hatred for their daughter became unbearable. To him, Ebube was nothing more than a painful reminder of a mistake he wished he could erase. His coldness left a deep void in her heart, but she endured, hoping that one day, life would show her kindness. Her stepmother, June, was no better. She treated Ebube as though she were invisible, an unwanted presence in the house. Every morning before dawn, Ebube was forced to wake up and begin her endless chores. She mopped the floors until they shone, scrubbed the bathrooms, washed piles of dishes, and even cut the grass in the garden, all while housekeepers stood idly by, watching her suffer. June ensured that she was overworked and exhausted, yet she never received a proper meal. Most days, she survived on leftovers or went to bed on an empty stomach. Her father, Mr. Nonso, remained indifferent to her suffering, acting as though her pain did not exist. To make matters worse, her younger stepsister, Alice, only deepened her misery. Though younger, Alice treated Ebube with open mockery and disdain, never missing an opportunity to remind her of her low status in the family. Alice was spoiled beyond measure, constantly showered with expensive clothes, jewelry, and the finest perfumes. After every extravagant shopping spree, she would return home and deliberately parade her new outfits in front of Ebube. "Look at these beautiful clothes I bought today," she would sneer, twirling in front of her. "I know you can never wear anything like this till you die." Her words stung, but Ebube remained silent. She had long learned that showing pain only fueled Alice's cruelty. Still, deep inside, she longed for the day she would finally be free. Ebube never responded to Alice's taunts. She swallowed her pain, burying it deep within her heart, and endured their cruelty in silence. Though her body ached from endless labor and her soul carried the weight of rejection, she refused to break. She clung to a fragile hope that someday, somehow, her suffering would come to an end. Deep down, she yearned for at least a fraction of fatherly care. Having already been denied a mother's love, she had hoped that Nonso would show her some affection. But that hope had long faded. To Nonso, she was nothing more than a burden, an unwanted shadow in his home. He treated her existence as an inconvenience, making no effort to hide his disdain. The household followed his lead, ensuring that every day felt like a punishment. Ebube had no one to turn to, but she silently vowed that she would survive. One day, Nonso's business faced an unexpected and severe financial crisis. His company, once thriving, was now on the brink of collapse. Debts piled up, creditors demanded payments, and his business partners began to withdraw their support. He needed urgent financial assistance, but every door he knocked on was firmly shut. Friends he once helped turned their backs on him, and banks refused to grant him loans. Desperation consumed him as he searched for a way out. His last hope was Chief Nana, the wealthiest and most influential man in the city. However, approaching a man of such stature was intimidating. Chief Nana was known for his ruthless business dealings, and Nonso feared rejection. After much internal struggle, he swallowed his pride, dressed in his finest suit, and made his way to Chief Nana's office. With a nervous heart but determined steps, he walked in, hoping for salvation. Chief Nana leaned back in his chair, a sly smile forming on his lips. "I will help you, Mr. Nonso," he said, pausing for effect. "But under one condition." Nonso, desperate and eager, leaned forward, ready to agree to anything. "What is the condition, Chief?" Chief Nana folded his hands on the desk. "How many daughters do you have, and how old are they?" Nonso hesitated for a moment before answering. "2 daughters. One is 23, and the other is 20. Chief Nana's smile widened. "Good. One of them must marry my son." Nonso's heart pounded, but he did not hesitate. "I agree," he said quickly. He was well aware that Chief Nana's only son, Obinna, was crippled. Despite all efforts and expensive medical treatments, the young man remained confined to a wheelchair. Many had whispered about his condition, some saying it was a curse. But to Nonso, none of that mattered. His business, his reputation, and his survival were on the line. And if sacrificing one daughter could secure his future, then so be it. Without a second thought, he made his decision. Ebube would be the sacrifice. When he got home, Nonso wasted no time. He settled into his favorite chair in the sitting room and called for Ebube. Ebube's heart pounded as she walked in. There was something unsettling in his tone, something that sent a shiver down her spine. She stood before him, her hands nervously clasped together. Nonso's voice was cold and commanding. "You will be getting married to Obinna, Chief Nana's son." Ebube froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Who is Obinna? Who is Chief Nana? How can I marry someone I do not even know?" she protested, her voice shaking. Alice, lounging comfortably on the couch, smirked. "You have never been useful in this house. Now that you finally have the opportunity to contribute, you're asking too many questions." Ebube turned to her father in disbelief. "Please, father, you can't do this to me." "Enough!" Nonso roared, his voice echoing through the room. "This is not up for debate. As I have said, so shall it be. You will marry him, and that's final." Tears welled in Ebube's eyes as she shook her head in despair. "Please, I beg you." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. With a wave of his hand, Nonso ordered the housekeepers, "Lock her in her room. She will remain there until the wedding day." 2 housekeepers grabbed Ebube's arms, dragging her away as she screamed and struggled. Her fate had been sealed. The wedding day arrived. But for Ebube, it felt like the end of her freedom. As she stood before the mirror, dressed in a breathtaking white gown, her reflection felt like that of a stranger. The makeup artists had done their best, but no amount of beauty could mask the sorrow in her eyes. She was about to marry a man she had never seen, a stranger imposed upon her for the sake of her father's greed. As she stepped out of the car at the wedding venue, her heart pounded violently. Then, her eyes met him, Obinna. He sat in a wheelchair, his expression unreadable. A cold chill ran through her spine. Her worst fears had come true. She was not just being forced into marriage but into a life filled with uncertainty. The walls of her world seemed to close in, trapping her in a fate she never chose. After the ceremony, Ebube moved into her husband's house, stepping into yet another phase of suffering. Though she resolved to take care of Obinna, it was far from easy. He was not just physically crippled, his heart was filled with bitterness. Before the accident, Obinna had been a vibrant, ambitious young man with a promising future. He was well-educated, charming, and admired by many. However, fate had other plans. One fateful evening, a reckless driver lost control and crashed into his car, leaving him permanently disabled. Chief Nana had spared no expense, taking him to the best hospitals. But every doctor gave the same verdict. Obinna would never walk again. This reality shattered him. He withdrew from the world, drowning in self-pity and anger. He resented everyone, including his new wife. To him, Ebube was nothing but another burden forced upon him. Obinna never spoke to Ebube, not even a word of acknowledgement. Whenever she tried to start a conversation, he would turn his face away as if she didn't exist. The walls between them grew thicker with each passing day. Determined to win his trust, Ebube observed his eating habits and learned his favorite meals. She spent hours in the kitchen, carefully preparing his dishes, hoping it would soften his heart. But every time she served him, he would sneer, pushing the plate away. "Stop pretending," he spat one evening, his cold gaze piercing through her. "I know you're not here for marriage but for my father's money." His words cut deep, but she swallowed the pain. Even the housekeepers, who were supposed to serve, whispered behind her back, laughing at her helplessness. She endured it all, day after day, rejection after rejection, until she could no longer bear it. One afternoon, after yet another cruel remark from Obinna, Ebube could no longer hold back her pain. She rushed to her room, slammed the door shut, and collapsed onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. Her chest tightened as silent screams escaped her lips. The walls seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with loneliness and despair. She had endured rejection, insults, and mockery, but this was unbearable. She hugged herself, as if trying to find warmth in a world that had only been cold to her. Was this truly the life she was destined to live? Hearing her muffled sobs from behind the closed door, Obinna felt something stir within him, an unfamiliar pang of guilt. For days, he had treated her with cruelty, dismissing her efforts and rejecting her kindness. Yet, she had endured it all without retaliation. Slowly, he wheeled himself down the hallway and stopped outside her door. For a moment, he hesitated, then knocked gently. "Ebube," he called softly. There was silence, then a sniffle. Gathering courage, he pushed the door open and entered. "I know I have not been a good husband to you," he admitted, his voice lower than usual. "But I will try my best from now on. I've realized that despite my mistreatment, you have only shown me love." That night marked the beginning of their healing. For the first time, Obinna saw Ebube not as an intruder in his life, but as a woman who had suffered just as much as he had. The weight of his guilt pressed heavily on him, and he knew he had to make things right. The next morning, he summoned the housekeepers to the living room, his tone firm and commanding. "Ebube is my wife," he declared. "Anyone who disrespects her will be fired immediately." The housekeepers exchanged glances, stunned by the sudden change. They had mocked her openly, believing their actions had Obinna's approval. Now, they bowed their heads in obedience. As Ebube walked down the hallway later that morning, she noticed the difference. The housekeepers greeted her with unexpected politeness. She paused for a moment, confused. What is going on? She wondered. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, a bond began to form between them. The tension that once filled the house started to fade, replaced by quiet understanding. They spent time together, sharing meals and having long conversations. One evening, as they sat in the garden under the soft glow of the moon, the cool breeze brushing against their skin, Ebube finally gathered the courage to open up. She spoke of her painful past, her mother's death, her father's hatred, and the years of suffering she endured. Obinna listened in silence, his heart growing heavier with every word. He had thought he was the only one carrying pain, but here she was, scarred yet still standing. "You are stronger than I ever realized," he murmured. And for the first time, he reached out and held her hand, a silent promise of change. One day, Chief Nana returned home, his face glowing with excitement. He could barely contain his joy as he rushed into the living room, where Obinna and Ebube sat today. "Obinna, I have found a specialist abroad who believes you can walk again after surgery," he announced, his voice trembling with hope. Obinna's eyes widened in shock. "What? Are you serious, Papa?" "Yes, my son," Chief Nana beamed. The doctor reviewed your case and is confident that with the right procedure and therapy, you will regain your ability to walk. Ebube clasped Obina's hand, her heart pounding with excitement. This is a miracle. The surgery was scheduled, and Obina, accompanied by Ebube, flew abroad with hope in their hearts. The journey was nerve-wracking, but Ebube remained by his side, offering constant reassurance. After hours in the operating room, the doctors finally emerged with a smile. The surgery was successful, they announced. Relief washed over Ebube as she clasped Obina's hand, tears of joy streaming down her face. Recovery was not easy. Obina endured months of grueling therapy, pushing himself beyond his limits. Ebube was his rock, encouraging him every step of the way. Then, one fateful afternoon, he took his first steps. Tears welled in Ebube's eyes as she watched him stand, shaky but determined. "You're walking," she gasped, overwhelmed with emotion. Back home, the news spread quickly. The entire household rejoiced. Chief Nana threw a grand celebration, grateful that his son had been given a second chance at life. Meanwhile, at Nonso's house, things went from bad to worse. His once thriving business collapsed after he fell victim to a fraudulent investment scheme. The scammers had promised enormous returns, and in his desperation to multiply his wealth, he poured everything he had into the scheme. Within weeks, his entire fortune vanished. As his financial woes deepened, creditors hounded him day and night. His once respected name became a source of mockery in town. The bank seized his properties, his expensive cars were repossessed, and his lavish lifestyle crumbled before his eyes. His wife, June, who once basked in luxury, became restless. "You must seek help from Chief Nana," she urged. Swallowing his pride, Nonso made his way to Chief Nana's mansion. However, upon arrival, he was met by the housekeeper, who firmly blocked his path. "The chief does not wish to see you," the man stated coldly. Nonso peered inside and, to his shock, saw Chief Nana standing by the window. A smirk played on his lips as he folded his arms. "After all the cruelty you showed to my daughter-in-law, you still have the audacity to ask for my help? Leave my house, Nonso. You deserve this downfall." Nonso returned home, utterly humiliated. He slumped into a chair, defeated, his mind spinning with regret. Days later, as he dragged himself to the dining table, his eyes fell on a neatly folded letter. With trembling hands, he opened it and read, "Nonso, I cannot continue living in poverty. I refuse to suffer for your mistakes. By the time you read this, I will be gone, with our daughter and the remaining money in our joint account. Don't bother looking for us. Goodbye." His heart pounded as the reality sank in. He had lost everything, including his own family. With nothing left, Nonso had no choice but to move into a cramped public yard, sharing a tiny room with strangers. The once proud businessman now lived in poverty, struggling to afford even a daily meal. Meanwhile, June and Alice, accustomed to luxury, found themselves struggling as well. With no more wealth to sustain them, they were forced to take jobs at a small, rundown restaurant, washing dishes and serving customers just to survive. The humiliation was unbearable, but they had no other options. Life had turned against them, forcing them to experience the same suffering they once inflicted on Ebube. As for Ebube, her life transformed into one of joy and fulfillment. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, bringing even more happiness into her home. Obina, now fully recovered, adored both his wife and daughter, showering them with love and care. Their family flourished, surrounded by warmth and prosperity. The pain of her past was now a distant memory, replaced by the peace she had always longed for. Justice had been served. Those who had wronged her faced their downfall, while she rose above it all, emerging victorious, stronger, and truly happy. Thank you for watching.
Like and subscribe.